So just a little bit about us, and I appreciate that many of you will have heard this before, so I will go through it rather quickly, but there may be some people here today who are new to the SCUPB experience, so please do bear with me while we go through these points. The SCUPB is a public body created as a result of the Good Friday Agreement. My colleague Paul informed me today that that agreement, I think, is 21 years old today, as of the 10th of April. We have two sponsored departments in the north and the south. So the Department of Finance in the north and the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform in the south, who are sponsor departments and help us in the delivery of the programmes. We are accountable to the North-South Ministerial Council, and we have overall responsibility for the Peace 4, which is why we're here today, and also the INTERREG 5A programmes. We also act as a contact point for some transnational programmes, which are INTERREG 5B and 5C. And we're based across the eligible area with the headquarters in Belfast. We have an office in Omagh also, and then we have an office in Monaghan, which is where my colleague Paul works from. Just a little bit about the context. And folks, a lot more detail will be available on our website as well. Or if you want to talk to any of the staff members following the presentation, please do approach us and we can answer any questions you have in more detail. This eligible programming area runs from 2014 to 2020, with programming having to be completed by 2023. It's much more concentrated and focused this time and works on the premise of priority access areas, which are areas which have been predefined through which your activity needs to support. And we say it's concentrated in that with Piece 1 and Piece 2, we delivered about 21,000 individual projects. But this time, with this Peace programme, we're sat at about 138 at the moment, I think. So it's got much more concentrated and focused, and that's down from about 360 projects under Piece 3 at INTERREG 4A. It's results oriented. That means it's not based on activity, but we do expect to see the outputs delivered as are agreed within your application forms and which we will assess you against. We need to see demonstrable effort in obtaining those outputs, whatever they may be. We also try as much as we can to reduce the administrative burden. You know, one of the things that we hear when we are out is that there's a lot of bureaucracy around these programmes. We understand that and we hear that. The bureaucracy comes at two levels. It comes at a European level and it also comes at a national level. And one of the things that we are doing actively at the moment is exploring how we can continue to reduce that administrative burden through the implementation of simplified cost options. We don't like administration as much as you would like it, okay? We want to reduce it across the piece. And finally, look, there are financial penalties. If the outputs aren't hit, if the targets aren't met, if your milestones aren't achieved, then there are penalties associated with not achieving those. It's not an activity-based grant programme, as you may have been used to in previous iterations of the Peace funding. So look, a little bit about this, and I'll spend about another 5 minutes, then we'll pass you over to Paul. The eligible area is Northern Ireland and the border region of Ireland, and that is it there, by the way, folks. So it's the counties, if you like, in Northern Ireland and the adjacent counties in the south also. That's the target area we're looking to impact upon through delivery of the Peace programme. It's about 229 million ERDF, which is the monies that comes from Europe. And that's match funded very kindly by the member states, including the accountable departments, by 15%. So you don't have to bring any funding to the table today for any of the projects that you may wish to consider. 20% of the budget within this programming period can be spent outside the eligible area, as long as it creates benefits within the eligible area. Single jurisdiction projects can be supported under PEACE, not under INTERREG, but under PEACE, provided that they contribute to the programme results and outputs. But Paul will talk in more detail, as will both of the accountable departments, about the types of things we're looking for within this call in building emotional resilience. That's the PEACE programme, graphically demonstrated in its simplest form. We have a strategic objective under shared education, and we have 2 projects delivering across that. We have a strategic objective in children and young people, and we have 11 or 12 projects running across that. We have another strategic objective in shared spaces and services. We have committed to building 9 new regional shared spaces, which is just completed over the last few months, and we're out with contract with those individuals at the moment. We have a victim and survivors element, where we work closely with VSS to support their work throughout the eligible area. And we also do quite a bit of work with the local authorities as well. And why we're here today, folks, is to talk about building positive relations at a local and regional level as well, particularly at a regional level. That's what it looks like. That's what we're dealing with at the moment in its entirety. We have 95 projects running concurrently at the moment under PEACE. So there's quite a bit of management involved in ensuring that those projects deliver against their letters of offer, if you like. And that's particularly what Paul and his team, and Leanne's here as well today from the Joint Secretariat, are carefully working with existing projects to ensure and support them in delivering against their letters of offer. We have one additional project there, which is a technical assistance project, and that's really to support SEUPB delivering the projects. So that's 6% of the budget, if you like, and that supports us, our organisation, to successfully deliver them over the programming period. We will be here today talking about building positive relations at a regional level. We have got a target there of hitting 20 projects. We're currently at 19. This morning we'll be talking about emotional resilience, and the afternoon we'll be talking about community cohesion. If I just flick back, we do quite a bit of work with the local authorities, 17 of them that are within the eligible area, and each of those local authorities have 3 projects running, if you like. They run projects in 0 to 24 children and young people, in developing local shared spaces and services within their council area, and also in building positive relations at a local level as well. So we do quite a bit of work with existing local authorities within this programming period. And the idea, the one thing that we're working closely on in the moment, is ensuring that we can deliver against the full purse, if you like, of funds that are available to SEUPB. What we don't want to do is to fall short and push money back to the Commission in funds that haven't been spent. But at the same time, there's a requirement upon SEUPB not to overcommit the programme also. So our goal really is to ensure that we get 100% of the available funds spent effectively to meet the strategic objectives that we talked about in the previous slide, and also to create the maximum impact within the eligible area. So, building positive relations at a regional level. Paul will get into much more detail about this, but it's really to promote positive relations at a regional level, characterised by respect and where cultural diversity is celebrated, and people can live, learn and socialise together, free from prejudice, hate and intolerance. That's the overarching aim. And today what you'll hear more about is how mental health prevention and awareness can be used as a vehicle in order to promote the policy that we have. The output indicator then, we talked a little bit previously about the intervention logic, and there are outputs that we need to achieve within each intervention, within each of the strategic objectives. And the output indicator within 4.2 is to create 20 projects. We're currently at 19, so we will overshoot hopefully by 1 and create 21. Regional level projects that result in meaningful, purposeful and sustained contact between people from different communities. That's the overarching aim of what we want to achieve through the delivery of this intervention today. And the result indicators then, so the output indicators are what you would be responsible for in delivering such a project. And then how that feeds into the result indicator is that we take evidence from the Life and Time surveys and other surveys from the South that will clearly demonstrate a journey travelled at a societal level. So the work that we do through the Peace Programme contributes, if you like, to the wider societal measures that we take on board from delivery of the projects. So what we want to see then is a journey travelled between the percentage of people who think relations between Protestants and Catholics are better than they were 5 years ago, the percentage of people who think relations between Protestants and Catholics will be better in 5 years' time, and also the percentage of people who know quite a bit, that's the terminology used in the surveys, quite a bit about the culture of some minority ethnic communities. So the intervention today that we're talking about will lead to the development of a project or projects that will help demonstrate a journey travelled within these result indicators. And that's it from me. We'll be here and take questions later on after the process is finished. But now I'll pass you over to Paul initially to talk through the application process. Just before I do that, just before they do it, I'm getting cues from the back and the front. As part of our ongoing interactive work and to encourage and create debate within the audience, we do have one application that we use in order to foster some discussion. If you have a phone with you today, I'm sure most of you do, and if you can, please log into slido.com. And it's once you get into that landing page, it'll ask you for a login, and if you just type in #SEUPB, if you're struggling with 3G or 4G access, the network for the hotel is open, so you can get Wi-Fi there. But if you log in to slido.com and access through #SEUPB, the first question we have, just to check that it's working, is one word to describe the weather this morning. That's the most innocuous question that we could find, I think. It wouldn't offend anyone. Anybody having difficulties connecting? Everyone? We'll let it proceed, okay? And we'll take it from there. We will come back to it. If you do try to log into the hotel Wi-Fi, that might be the best way to proceed. Look, some people are connecting anyway. Some very super and happy people are connecting today. But we will continue to work through the Slido process. And when you're in Slido, by the way, there's two tabs. There's one for polls and there's one for questions. If there's any questions you have at any time and you don't want to put your hand up or you'd like to ask an anonymous question, please do host it through Slido, and we'll be monitoring it as we progress through today, and we will revert back to that question once we do have an opportunity to do so. So we'll leave Slido for now, and what I'll do is I'll pass you on to my colleague Paul, who will start talking through the application process. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Good morning, everyone. Good morning to everyone online also. My name's Paul Boylan. I've worked for SEUPB for about 7 years now. I've been around and I've seen the two programmes to date. Today, I'm going to talk you through some of the high-level detail of the call. I'm then going to talk you through our assessment process, and then I'm going to talk you through how to apply. And when it comes to the budget stage on how to apply, I'm going to defer to my colleague Alistair. As Mark rightly said, it's 21 years since the Good Friday Agreement. This call was born out of what we've seen as a critical need. There is clearly evidence around the mental resilience of young people and the need to assist, work with and help young people in this area. We saw this as an opportunity to do it through peace building, to bring communities together to tackle a shared problem. And this is what the call is essentially trying to do. I'm going to talk you through the slides. Please, as we go through today, if you have a question, go to Slido, ask the question if you get access. We will take questions at the end of the session before we hand on to our policy colleagues as well. So, where we're at now is that we are seeking one ambitious peace building project for the emotional resilience for today and the future project that we are proposing. We anticipate it will be a consortium bid so that it has reach, but we also anticipate it will have some degree of expertise both in peace building and in the field of mental health. Maybe just by way of a show of hands, can you put your hand up if you're in the peace building field? Yeah, great. And the mental health field, anyone? I suppose we're all in the sort of mental health field in some degree, but no, that's great. Thank you very much. So we have an excellent mix here today. I would say that's probably about 50-50, which is really good. We are looking to have impact locally within the communities, but we also have to have regional significance in this. So what that means in practice for the proposal is that it has to cover a number of key areas. It has to have regional significance, and that's the entirety of Northern Ireland and the border counties, with the exception of Louth, because there's already existing activity there. And it has to, as a minimum, have activity in the 5 urban villages, but it could also have activity beyond that also. So it's not simply just the 5 villages. You could go beyond that if you have capacity to do so. The project cost is €6.4 million. That's what we have available for this call. The application must be in euros, and you should be using a planning rate of £1 sterling to €1.18. It's anticipated that the project will be 3 years in duration maximum. And these are some of the key sort of showstoppers that your bid has to have, and that's why I'm highlighting them up front. In relation to that, we have certain activities that are in and certain activities that are out, and certain key points. The programme will not fund statutory mental health services. This is about building the capacities in the communities to serve young people, to help them with their own personal mental resilience. It's not about duplicating the statutory health services that are currently in place. It's not solely about mental health, and this programme is a peace programme. We are looking to bring people together through sustained contact on a cross-community basis to help young people with their mental health. That's the key. It's about bringing people together with the joint problem of solving the issues or assisting with the issues that are presenting in young people today. There's one couple of key elements. SUP will fund an evaluation, so if you're putting a bid together, you don't need to worry about how it will be evaluated. SUPB will do that. And we will also host a showcase event, and that's likely to be to an international audience. So when you're putting your bids together, bear that in mind. SUPB will also help in the formation of a consultative advisory panel. That panel has not been appointed yet, and it will be appointed probably post decision on the project that is likely to go forward. But it's a key element, and when you're putting your bid together, you need to think about how your bid will service that consultative advisory panel. At what point would you see the consultative advisory panel engaging with your project to help shape and steer it from a policy and delivery perspective? So ultimately, what we are aiming to do with this call is to enable children and young people to understand, feel empowered and have confidence to act and participate fully in their own community and wider communities, where they can encourage and build positive relations to develop their role in peace building with their own community and in other areas on a cross-community, cross-border basis. So that has to be at the forefront of your mind when you're developing your bids. This is what we're trying to aim to deliver, a difference within young people. And we're certainly open to certainly the evaluation having some feed from the participant as to how we monitor the distance travelled in the young people so that we could demonstrate achievement towards that. Okay, I'm now going to go on to the selection criteria and tell you how SUPB assessed the application. So we assess it against 7 criteria. I must make it clear this is a one-stage call. Previously we've had 2-stage calls. This is a one-stage call, so one bid straight into our EMS system, and we will assess that. So we will assess it against the 7 criteria outlined above, and I'll go through each of those now. You'll note that some of the criteria have a weighting, so governance is reduced to 10% and split across our horizontal principles of sustainable development and equality. So the first selection criteria, what SUPB are looking for here is how your project will deliver against the results and outputs of the programme. So you need to refer to the output indicator guidance. If you haven't already done so, we'll make it available. It's on our website, but we can make it available when we issue the slides and the link to the slides, so it's right up there. And that tells you how we measure it. And there's some key issues in there in that we see cross-community splits as in Northern Ireland a 60-40 split of background, and in the border counties of Ireland an 80-20 split, and that split could go either way with either community. If you have any issues with that in developing your bid, please come to us. And we appreciate you will have to set yourself targets as a project as to how you will do that and how you will bring them together. In simple terms, it might be bringing a predominantly Protestant school group of teachers with a predominantly Catholic school group of teachers together to teach them about helping young people, and that might get your quota. It might get your quota. It might not guarantee it, but it might get your quota. So there are some of the things that you may want to consider when you're putting together your bid, how you will engage on a cross-community basis. We'll be looking to see how you'll demonstrate and create opportunities for sustained, meaningful, purposeful contact. The activity itself, training people, is meaningful, and it's how you make that training purposeful, and that's what you as experts will have to bring to life in your applications so that we can consider it. Just to continue on from that, the regional characteristic has to be brought out in the delivery and implementation. So we've already mentioned the 5 urban villages and the counties in Ireland that you have to engage with, but you will have to look at how you disseminate some of the learning and findings and shared experiences across those. This can't be isolated activity taking place. It has to be connected, and you need to demonstrate how that connection gives you regional impact. You should be addressing strategic policy issues relevant to the region, and some of the policy content will be presented by my colleagues in the Accountable Department later on to give you a feel for what we expect to see there. So just the final point on the results and outputs and what we will be looking at. You'll be required to work alongside existing community infrastructures. So we're not expecting you to reinvent the wheel. So you will know the infrastructures that are in place within certain communities and how they work. And we would ask that you engage with those infrastructures rather than creating new infrastructures. So you may be engaging with governing bodies, partnership organisations to ensure that you get the reach into the existing networks and you don't duplicate the services or the existing infrastructures. Okay, the second selection criteria is the project design. We want to see how the proposed activities will have an impact. I think that's fairly clear and simple, but how do you do that? That's the task that you have. And we see this a lot where applicants do not evidence the theory of change behind what they're trying to achieve. So if you're having a sustained contact, is it contact theory? So the cross-community contact will then germinate relationships, which will then sustain and help both in terms of peace and in terms of looking after young people, because young people engage with a number of different organisations and services, and having that continuity of training and contact on a cross community, and in some cases a cross-border basis, is really key. But you have to explain that to us. We cannot assume that. You have to make that clear to us in your bid. Inclusivity and engaging with marginalised target groups. Those concepts are open. We're not restrictive on what that means in practice. It's up to you to present how you feel people are at risk or marginalised. That may be through income levels, that may be through deprivation indexes, things like that. You would look at those key indicators out there to demonstrate how you've designed your project to meet the needs of the marginalised in society and the people that we're trying to target within the project that are most in need of these services. So your project team and your implementation arrangements, the section 3 of our assessment criteria, you have to ensure you have the right mix of skills and experience. We would anticipate that we would have practitioners, we would anticipate that we would have delivery agents, we would anticipate that we would have a regional body that can engage in a service provision on a regional basis, and they have continuity. We would expect it to be the right people, and it's up to you to explain that to us again, why you feel you have the right mix of skills and partners to bring together to deliver on this call. Value for money. Alistair's going to talk about the practical elements of that in the application later, but in essence, we need a rationale for the costs and budgets under each of the budget headings, and we'll see those in a moment. The next assessment criteria, selection criteria 5, is around the added value. We expect the project to be regional, and we expect to see cooperation on a cross-border and cross-community basis. So it's not about just who you're delivering to, it's about how you're delivering. Is the partnership on a cross-community level? Do you have engagement with organisations which would be representative from the CNR community and the PUL community? You need to think about that when you're developing your bid and demonstrating the added value of that. Because having key leaders in those communities engaging on a topic brings a lot of weight to it. And we would ask that you give that real consideration when you're developing your partnership and looking to put in a bid, because it's key to us that we have buy-in from the communities to deliver this. And, I don't think, mental health affects everybody regardless of your community background. So, I don't think there's any excuse not to engage in this activity. And I don't see why you couldn't come together on a cross-community basis to do so. Okay, the two horizontal principles, we have sustainable development and equality, and they're born out of regulations. We are required to assess each project against the sustainable development criteria. So you need to think about the legacy. You need to think about the exit plan of this project, and that's a section within the application form that we ask for details on. You need to think about the three E's: the environment, the economy, and the effectiveness. These are the three key elements of sustainable development. We have guidance on our website and under our applicant's guide around all of this and what we expect to see. Please, I don't expect you to retain all of this. The slides will be available and there will be further workshops. So today is really your opportunity to get a feel for it, feel the partners out, and also get an idea of whether or not you want to take this forward, because there will be follow-up sessions and whether this is a fit for you and your organisation. So, don't get overly worried about each of the criteria and all of that just now, but this hopefully will give you a good flavour of what we are trying to achieve. And then on equality, we would expect to see some sort of screening of the project and how you're going to deliver against the equality criteria. Okay, when it arrives into us, we do our initial eligibility check, in terms of do you have a constitution, all of those sorts of things, accounts and that's in our guide to applicants, and that's available on our website. And then we set about asking questions to seek points of clarity, and then we score the application and make a recommendation to steering committee. So we score the application from 0 to 5 in each of the 7 criteria. You must score a minimum of 3 in each of the criteria, so that's a maximum score of 60% in order to consider progression to phase to letter of offer and recommendation from steering committee. So bear that in mind, and we have the selection criteria, the scoring criteria on the applications and programme rules, and I think it's in the applicant guide as well. So it's all out there for you to see how we score it. So that's SUPB's assessment programme. I'll now come on to talk about the electronic management system, which is the means by which you submit an application to SUPB. So the lead partner will need to register on our electronic management system. We have a registration process on our website, and we also have a support desk called Fresh Desk that will help you with any issues. It's a fairly simple registration process, and then there's guidance on our website as well around how to complete your application. And then if you have any issues, you could raise a ticket and someone will come back to you helping to resolve your issue that's been presented. I would also say that, in terms of any technical advice, I'm available, my team's available. I notice there's a few of them here today. So we have Kenda, Sean, Adele, Leanne's here also. So, please do take the opportunity to chat to us. And throughout the process, if you have any points of clarity, pick up the phone. We're here to help. We're here to help get the right application through the process. Okay, so section 1 of the EMS is an executive summary. So what is the challenge that you're trying to address in this? We need you to spell that out clearly. We've obviously spelled it out in the call in some great detail. We talk about the intergenerational impact and legacy of the conflict, and we have some academic references and so forth. Siobhan sitting here, she's one of the co-authors on that. So there's quite a clear evidence base at a programme level for this activity, but we need to see the challenges that you're presenting and addressing at a local level. So we don't want to see a regurgitation of what we've put in the call document. We want to see you addressing the specific issues that your project's setting out to do. Obviously make reference to what the call says, but we don't want it verbatim in that section. And then you put a small synopsis of what your project is and what it hopes to, the change it hopes to create. Okay, the next section is the partnership overview, and this is where you add all your partners and your partner budgets and the deliverables. The way the electronic management system works is that when you're developing your bid, you should be thinking about deliverables. So, for instance, this event today, a deliverable would be book the venue, but the outcome would be inform people about the call. So within that, you might have 4 deliverables: book the venue, book the VC company, and book the speakers. So you've got 3 deliverables, all giving you the output of informing. So you need to think about it. It's project management and breaking down the activities. You don't want to break them down into too granular a level, but you have to break them down, and you need to think about targets around those deliverables. So have that in the back of your mind when you're thinking about how will your project work in practice, and you're delivering through that. So that's the partnership. So each partner will have deliverables which will ultimately feed into the output of the project. Section 3 sets out your design and what you will put in there. We're looking for SMART objectives, and I think we're all familiar with those terms. But think about it and reread it before you put it into us, because once it's in, we're only allowed to seek clarity. We're not allowed to develop your bid further. And we're only trying to clarify the issues that you've put down. So you should put down all of the activities in the design, outlining how, when, where, and the quality of the contact, because ultimately that's what we're hoping to achieve, which is the contact, which gives us the difference. Okay, sections 4, 5 and 6 of the application talk about some of the strategic and policy context, and my colleagues will talk about the policy context within Northern Ireland in a moment, and how that fits with your project and the activities. We also want to see how it's additional. We're aware of lots of small bits of work going on within communities around mental health for young people. So are we adding to that, or are we displacing that activity? We need to understand that, and you need to have an understanding on the ground what's happening. That's why it's key. You need to be linking up with partnership organisations. I see the East Side Partnership, for instance. They will have a very good understanding of the activity that's happening on the ground in the east of Belfast, for instance. So these are the sorts of things you need to think about. What is the activity going to be, and what is it likely to displace or not? And where is the additionality of that activity? You need to consider need and demand. In every case, what's leading you to do the intervention? Other than the call, what at the local level are the indicators? Is it feedback from the community? Is it health indicators? Is it the deprivation indicators? You need to talk to us on that and explain why the need and demand is there for the activity. You also need to consider briefly the options. I would ask that you don't labour this point, but that you address the obvious. The do nothing option is always a good one, because we know that the issue will just continue to grow. So, that was considered, but it's not something that we wish to adopt. So that's just a fairly straightforward one, but we would expect there maybe be 1 or 2 options, and why your option is the preferred option. And we just need to understand that you've thought about things when you've put your project together. Okay, Section 7 is the project objectives, expected results and the main outputs. Section 7 of the call document, we set out in great detail in that section what we expect to see there, and from you. You'll see it's on Section 7, anticipated actions. This is the stuff that we expect to see in some way, shape or form. And some of it we expect you to flesh out and put a bit of detail on it. So if you're getting to Section 7, please pick up your call document and go, right, am I in line with some of the anticipated actions here to deliver the results and outputs of the programme? So that's where this section in the call document you need to refer to. The management arrangements. We would expect you to set out and describe the management structure. Organograms and project structures are always great. I'm a visual person, and seeing those makes things a lot clearer for us on how it works in practice. You also need to demonstrate that you have the capacity to deliver on the activities, particularly of this scale and complexity. That's more so for the lead partner, but we would expect to see the project partners, put a line or two around how they have the capacity and expertise to deliver the service. Please provide any relevant experience. That's always helpful because we take assurance from that. Section 9 is the monitoring and evaluation plan, but in your case, it's more so the monitoring plan because we will be working with you on doing an independent evaluation. So it's more, what information do you see yourself collecting at the start of the project, middle of the project, end of the project? How do we feed that into an evaluation which we'll commission? You need to think about the distance travelled. There's models out there around distance travelled, around young people's mental health. There's already existing statistics, both health agency, I think there's Life and Times and things like that out there that you may want to consider. But again, it's how much information are you collecting, how often, and what are you going to do with that information. Ultimately, we will be using that information for our evaluation. So, feel free to pick up the phone and chat to us about how you would see that working in practice, and we could talk you through some of our hopes and expectations around that. Okay, you're then getting on to the sort of final couple of sections before you actually get into the work plans. So the horizontal principles, we would expect you to be detailing how you align with those in each jurisdiction. There are sustainable development strategies that are in place. We would expect you to illustrate how you promote sustainable development in terms of integration of environment, economy and social issues. How are you going to try and sustain it and make it work for everyone? There's training on our website, I mentioned earlier, and please feel free to refer to that. I appreciate we're bombarding you with a lot of information, but we will help you navigate that in order that you can get the best bid. Evidence of the exit strategy and how the project will sustain post-completion. We need to understand that. So if you're putting in place infrastructures or engaging with existing networks, how will you ensure the legacy of the project lives on? How do you ensure, do you see it being mainstreamed? Do you see the education authority if you're dealing with schools, or do you see the youth sector engaging, and how do you see that being sustained? You need to think about that, and you need to think about how you come out of this at the other side. We expect you to only have 3 work packages available. So the work packages are where you detail the deliverables. So the 3 that we have and will be available for you on the electronic management system are the management, implementation and communications. So management is mandatory. You should be detailing the operation and strategic activities, governance, daily management, reporting requirements, budgetary expenditure, all of the stuff you would expect to see in there in your management work package. The way the electronic management system works is it forces you to put deliverable dates on, which is really quite good. But in some respects, we don't want you duplicating the work. So, for instance, you might have 10 operational working groups over the lifetime. We don't want to see 10 different deliverables. We would just see one deliverable, 10 operational work groups by 2023. That's what we would expect to see. So think about how you're going to present your project before you embark on the process of filling in the electronic management system. Communications. There's training and a toolkit available on communications, but we would expect to see quite a bit of communications because there'll be some findings coming out of your project, some understanding, some lessons learned. There'll also be some really good stories and personal journeys that we would expect you to be articulating there also. So you need to think about how you're going to communicate within your project and then how you're going to communicate outside your project. What's the platforms? You might even think, do we need a comms person full time on this? And that's something that you want to think about. What we see consistently is an underrepresentation of administration roles within projects. The role of completing the electronic management system, servicing the committees, the steering groups, it's not to be underestimated. Often it's a full-time role, and we're seeing projects that are maybe 6 months in, quickly realising that there's a lot of administration. So please do not underestimate the administration involved in your project. It makes or breaks some projects in some instances, because if you don't have the papers there, if you don't have the reports in on time, things don't happen, and you have to have the administration there. So please, a plea from me, because I'm currently looking at a lot of change requests for administration, is that you think about that up front and you ensure that you have sufficient budget and resources there to deliver on that side of things. The implementation, it should detail, you'll probably have a number of strategic themes. So you might have, for instance, dissemination or academic understanding or delivery in the eligible area as some of your implementation work packages. But you will then have to break that down into deliverables. So again, think about it in very clear project management style. Each deliverable goes up to an output which sits within a work package. The work package gives you the global output. I'm now going to hand over to Alistair, who's going to talk you through some of the budgeting sections.
Good morning, everybody. This is the exciting part. Not. Welcome to the wedding room at the Tillyagan Hotel. I'm sure there's any significance about that. But my name's Alistair Mackenzie. I've been in my current role with SUPB for about 7.5 years. Been with SUPB just over 9 years in total. The primary role of my unit would be to verify and certify expenditure claims from projects. So my involvement today is to take you through the budget and finance part of the application, but with an eye on what happens later. So the two things are linked. So we'll be looking at the value for money criterion within the assessment, and we will provide advice and guidance on the applicability of the budgets and the costs that you've presented in your application. And we feed into the joint secretariats that with Paul and Leanne's team. We'd make a recommendation on the robustness of the costs and proportionality of the cost presented. Okay, so that's just a wee bit of background. Okay, so moving on. Within the budget section, it's a standalone section, and Paul's already mentioned that the currency to be used is euro. In implementation, you'll have to, if you're based in Northern Ireland, you'll be uploading, or you incur the costs in Northern Ireland, or in the UK, you'll be uploading your costs in sterling, but the system will then calculate it. But for the purposes of the application, you will utilise an exchange rate of 1.18 for sterling costs, okay? And present all your costs in euro. As Paul's mentioned, work packages is a major feature of the EMS system, and all budgets and costs and budgets are to be input by work package, by partner, and by period. Now, if your project's running for 36 months, as is intended or expected, then you have to split down your budget and your costs in that way and spread them out. We wouldn't anticipate that the costs are spread evenly for all costs. We've seen that in applications in the past, so we just advise you where costs are expected, that's where they should be input in the application. Okay, it'll help you and it'll help us later. Paul's already covered the three work packages. They are management, implementation and communication. I'm going to go into staff costs in a minute. For staff costs, you should be inputting against as few work packages as possible to make life easy for yourselves and us when we're verifying expenditure later on. So if you've got someone who's the project lead, but they've got a small bit of input on communication, or, an insignificant amount or an immaterial amount, put the costs for that individual against the management work package rather than splitting it out, say 95% against one and 5 for the other. Just make life easy for yourselves, okay? The start date of the project drives the periods for your project, because each period on the EMS system will be predominantly 3 months, except for the first and last period, which will be, or the first period, the actual start date of the project drives the first period. So but it will guide you. So if you put the first date of the start date of your project, it will tell you what the first period is. Then every period thereafter is 3 months until the final period. Okay. So on the EMS system, there are 6 budget headings: staff costs, office and administration, external expertise and services, travel and accommodation, equipment costs, and capital investment costs. That will be shown on the system as infrastructure and works. By the regulations, it's actually capital investment, but the developer of EMS chose a different title for the 6 budget heading. I can't explain why, but it's one and the same. Okay. Couple of points to note there: statutory redundancy costs, if they're applicable. So if you've got someone on a fixed term contract of more than 2 years, they could be entitled to statutory redundancy. That would be considered to be a staff cost, and recruitment costs wouldn't be included as a staff cost. That would be included as external expertise. Okay, these are a couple of points that we've noticed that where we've had to advise people to change their application. We've had to recommend changes to budgets following the application. On the system, there'll be a mandatory attachment for you to upload to the system. Now that will be with the call, and one of the mandatory attachments is staff costs, because we need a lot of detail when we're assessing staff costs. So we're looking at the justification for each post. We're looking at what grade they're sat at. Are they an existing employee? Are they to be recruited? We're looking at the basic starting salary, employer costs. That would be national insurance contributions or PRSI in Ireland, and employer pension costs. You're allowed to claim for all of them, and any other eligible staffing costs. If you work for an organisation that has an essential car element, that would be included. Part of that would be included against travel and accommodation, which is another issue. Proportionate time on the project, so you may well have an employee or a staff member who you see spending 100% of their time on the project, but you might have others in more senior roles who you see contributing less, perhaps 10%, 20%. We need to know that. The duration on the project for each staff member, the job description, and the salary scale. The partner organisation, we would expect to see a staff cost attachment for each project partner, because the budget is built up on EMS by partner. So that partner organisation, that will be, it's probably a title to the sheet for that partner. Okay. And the salary scale. Now, new members of staff who are externally recruited, we would anticipate that they start at the bottom of the prescribed salary scale, unless you put forward a justification for an individual who's externally recruited starting above that scale. Okay. Mark, in his opening gambit, mentioned simplified cost options. One mandatory simplified cost option for this call is the application of office and admin costs. That's effectively an overhead, and it's done as a flat rate of staff costs. So when you're building up your application on the system, tick the flat rate box, and it automatically applies 15% in respect of office and admin costs as a proportion of staff costs. Okay, so there's no need. If you leave it unticked, you have to put it in manually. So I would urge you to tick the flat rate box on the system. For all other costs, now that would be the other 4 budget headings. I wouldn't envisage seeing infrastructure and works costs with this call, but the other 3 budget headings, that would be travel and accommodation, external expertise, and equipment costs. we would need to see a full justification for each of those costs. So just how you've arrived at that the inclusion of that cost. So we want to see the evidence for it, maybe a breakdown of how you've arrived at it. If you've come up with £10,000 of mileage costs under travel and accommodation, we want to see the amount of miles, the rate you've used, and the justification for the journeys or the nature of the journeys that you're likely to undertake when arriving at that cost. And that goes for every cost. Now, there'll be an opportunity if we feel when we're assessing this, if you haven't provided sufficient evidence or rationale or assumptions to support all these costs, there'll be an opportunity during clarification to provide more evidence if that's needed. All right. So there's another screen within the budget section. It's called the defined contribution screen. It's effectively for you to show us how the project's been funded. Under Peace, there's a maximum of a 100% grant available, but just on the off chance that you might want to provide some of your own funding towards the project, this is where that would be included. Okay. If you're not including any partner funding, then in section 2 in the application, all you would need to do would be input 85%, which is the maximum ERDF percentage, and then on the defined contribution screen, you would put 15% against a Kent Road Department match. That's how that's handled. The funding of the programme's handled. So as it says there, match funding is a minimum of 15% of total project costs, and the Kent Road Department will provide up to 15%. So, anybody got any questions on that? I know it's quite complicated. Blank faces. If you've got any questions when you're building your application, as Paul mentioned, just contact us and we will try to help. Okay. Paul was going to do this. It didn't make sense for him to push past Mark, so I'll just cover the timeline. So today, 10th of April, the workshop. Regarding the call, there's going to be 3 expert workshops delivered and expert advice in the coming weeks. Have you got any idea when the top 3? Got dates in the diary already? Yeah. You complete your application and the associated mandatory attachments and submit that by 24th of May at 5 p.m. Any questions at all on the budgets and finance or timeline or anything at all?
Folks, we are getting some questions through Slido, so please do keep them coming through, and Paul and I will review them towards the end of the presentation. Is there anybody here who's thinking about applying, who hasn't used the EMS before? So, anybody who has used the EMS previously then? So you've got the warts and the scars and everything with you, I understand, yeah? Okay, thanks.
Just continue with the stage 2 process. I'm sure you can read it all. If you can't read it, I'll read it out. SEB commences the assessment process, including external appraisal. So we're getting external experts to help us look at your applications. And we will seek points of clarity from yourselves, and that's following the Kent Road Department's assessment or review of the applications. So we'll feed them all the points of clarity back to you, and that will usually be done within 4 to 6 weeks. And then the assessment papers are issued to the Kent Road Departments 4 weeks before the steering committee, and we issue the papers to the steering committee 2 weeks prior to the steering committee. And the steering committee is scheduled at this stage for the 25th of October, and we aim to have letters of offer issued within a fortnight of the steering committee. Okay. Do you want me to cover this as well?
Yeah, just fine. Maybe you.
Yeah, no, we've got Tony Dignan, who's with us here today, who's worked previously with us, and Tony will be running a series of workshops to support you in application development throughout the process. And really what he will aim to do is to ensure that the purposeful, meaningful and sustained elements of building positive relations at a regional level comes through in your proposal. This is not a health project, it's a peace project, with the intervention being the vehicle in order to promote purposeful, meaningful and sustained relationships within the communities that we have illustrated in Paul's presentation. And we just have to be very careful that your project is designed in such a way that will lead to the output required within the overall programme framework. So Tony has helped us previously within the shared spaces calls to ensure that those builds actually do bring about shared spaces where both communities can come together, coexist and thrive. And the people who came to those workshops and used Tony's expertise, by and large, were the ones who made a good fist at the applications and were funded. So we will be in touch with you over the coming days just to arrange the timescale for those workshops and the locations of those workshops. But if you can do, please do make sure you're available. Yeah, look, we'll push on to our colleagues from the accountable departments now, and then we do have some questions through in Slido. Please do continue to bring them through, or we will take questions at the end from the audience as well. So, if I may, I'll pass you over to Sean. Is it Lindsay? Sorry, apologies. Lindsay first, and we'll give you a policy perspective from the north. I'll give you this.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. As Marcus said, my name is Lindsay Farrell. I'm from the Executive Office, and I feel a bit inadequate standing here today because I'm speaking on behalf of other government departments as well in Northern Ireland, so forgive me for that. My expertise is around the Urban Villages programme. But over the next number of slides, I'll set the policy context from a Northern Ireland point of view in terms of both the health aspects of the programme that we've talked about and then more specifically the good relations element from the Urban Villages point of view. So obviously the draft programme for government in Northern Ireland really sets the agenda for all of the government departments, and for us this is a really important policy context. So we're working across a number of outcomes here, and we see a real opportunity for projects that come forward under this call to be able to meet those in a more integrated, coordinated way, which ultimately we should be about in terms of shared outcomes. And I think this is a real opportunity to start to demonstrate that. So on the slide, you'll see the outcomes from a health perspective that we're working towards. So we have a more equal society, recognising that some of the communities we're talking about here around the Urban Villages programme, and I'm sure also the comparable communities in the south have issues around multiple deprivation, legacy issues, those complex transgenerational issues that can lead to many inequalities, including health inequalities. Then outcome 4, we lead long, healthy and active lives, creating the conditions for people to live well in terms of preventative work, to reduce risk through early intervention and to recover from health and social adversity. Now, after Sean's input from the southern point of view in terms of the policy context, I'll be talking in a bit more detail about the various strands of what we would see. So I'd like you to bear in mind those 3 strands there: prevention, early intervention and recovery, because that will become significant as we go through the presentation. In terms of outcome 8, we care for others and we help those in need, creating social responsibility through building both human and social capital. And again, you will see the clear links to that outcome when we come to talk about urban villages in a bit more detail, what it's about in terms of building capacity within communities, and really improving that social capital within areas, but recognising the great practice that already exists in communities and building on that. Then outcome 14, we give our children and young people the best start in life, creating the right social pathways to tackling adverse childhood experiences. And again, ultimately, that's at the heart of what this project is about. It's about good relations. It's about bringing our children and young people together, but it's also about tackling some of those fundamental issues and barriers that can prevent them from doing so in the meaningful way that we might like them to. The next slide is just showing some particularly key documents from the Department of Health point of view within Northern Ireland. And I think across all of these, what they're saying is that this has to be people-centred. And this again is the crux of what we would like to see coming forward through this call. A focus not only on the beneficiaries of such a project, and there's no doubt this will have a huge impact on communities, but people-centred also in terms of building the capacity within communities around identifying and equipping people to deal with these issues that they face on an everyday basis. And so all of those documents, you will see that that's very much the thread that runs through them, and that a people-centred, individual-centred focused approach is what it's all about. And the next slide really continues with some of those significant documents in terms of the Department of Health in Northern Ireland, and it might be useful for you to acquaint yourself with those and what's being proposed in terms of the various methodologies and the principles that should be applied. And we'll talk in a little bit more detail around that when we come to the three strands that we see as being fundamental to this type of project. Then in terms of children and young people more generally, we have a children and young people strategy for Northern Ireland from 2017, 10-year strategy up until 2027. And again, useful to acquaint yourself with that around the priorities that have been set out, particularly for children and young people in terms of improving their lives, intervening earlier in their lives, recognising their roles within community both now, but also equipping them better for the future as well. So again, a very useful strategic document. And then in terms of the Urban Villages initiative itself, as Paul and Mark have both mentioned, in terms of Northern Ireland, the target areas are the 5 urban village areas that have been designated under the Urban Villages programme under the Together Building a United Community strategy. And in a similar way, as Mark and Paul have really reaffirmed again and again this morning, Urban Villages is a good relations programme, and good relations is at its heart. It's often seen as a regeneration programme, but regeneration is merely the mechanism and the means through which to build better good relations, cohesion and connectivity, both within communities and across communities. And so we see this as another fantastic opportunity for the urban village areas to continue that journey around building good relations through a programme such as this that we're talking about this morning. There's 3 core aims to the Urban Villages programme that you will see there: foster positive community identities, build community capacity and improve the physical environment. And we see the first 2 of those as being really key strategic levers for this Piece 4 call. So in terms of fostering positive community identities, that's what we're talking about when we're talking about building good relations, promoting social cohesion and promoting reconciliation both within and across communities. And again, that's a really strong message that has to be woven through everything that would be included in a bid for this call. And we would need you to give careful thought to how that would be done so that it is meeting both the urban villages outcomes, but more importantly, the Piece 4 outcomes in terms of that sustained, meaningful contact that's so important in terms to be consistent with the spirit of the programme. Then the second of the core aims is around building community capacity, and this is another key pillar for the Urban Villages programme. So it's not about external organisations parachuting into areas and then leaving again. That is absolutely not what Urban Villages is about. Urban Villages is based on the ethos of being a community-informed programme, recognising the capacity that is already within communities, the relationships that already exists there, the community structures and infrastructure that already exists there, and building on what's there. And again, this is consistent with what Paul and others have said previously. This is not about establishing new where there is no need to do that. And it's really important in terms of fidelity to the Urban Villages ethos that is really preserved in any bid that would come forward. That whole idea of partnership with community, working with and through organisations that are there, and working with and through existing community infrastructure that is there. There is existing infrastructure that we have set up under Urban Villages. So each urban village has a reference group already. One of those exists in each area, and it has key representatives from the community around those reference group tables. Again, the membership of those can be fluid to make changes in communities and to allow for gaps to be identified and addressed. But that's really the key mechanism for us in government, to engage with those communities, to sense check ideas and proposals. And it's really important to us that that continues to be used in that way, because ultimately the people around that table are the people who know those communities best, know the needs best, know what works best in that particular area. And this area-based approach really allows for those local nuances and that deeper understanding of communities to come through. So that's something that's really important to the Urban Villages initiative. A lot of intensive engagement work went on at the outset of setting up the Urban Villages programme, and the output of all of that was that each urban village created what is called a strategic framework. And that was basically a high-level document for each of the 5 areas that set out the community's priorities. Those are all available online, well worth looking at. I think you will see when you look at them, there are great similarities across the 5 areas, but there are also differences, and there's those subtleties and nuances that are well worth understanding before approaching any work around urban villages. As I've mentioned, there are 5 urban villages. They were identified by ministers, and there's 4 of those in Belfast, 1 in Derry, Londonderry. The 4 in Belfast cover 4 areas in the city. So north covers Ardoyne and Greater Ballysillan. South covers Sandy Row, Markets and Donegal Pass. The east side urban village is the lower part of the Newtonards Road, and then west, which covers the entire Colin area of West Belfast. The Derry Londonderry urban village covers Bogside, Fountain and Bishop Street. So again, you'll be seeing differences in terms of the demographics, in terms of the geography, and so I would point you in the direction of those strategic frameworks. But I would remind you those are high-level documents. They set out the key priorities, the key themes, and the strategic actions that communities thought necessary to take forward. But what I would say through all of our work on urban villages and indeed on other programmes, mental health issues and emotional resilience have come up time and time again. Yes, specific to children and young people, but more widely as well. So there is certainly an issue with this across communities. What we're hearing from people working within communities is that they feel ill-equipped to deal with these issues, but yet they want to, because they recognise that it's the people within communities who have the relationships and the trust often with children and young people, and they would like to be better equipped and skilled up to address these challenges and to deal with them in the appropriate way. I'd like to reiterate something that Paul and Mark mentioned earlier. This is not, absolutely not, about replacing clinical practice and where medical interventions are required. This is about a trauma-informed approach to working within communities. This is about building the capacity of communities through a range of lower-level interventions to both identify when there might be an issue, to intervene early, to signpost, to provide advice and guidance that hopefully may prevent young people needing a medical intervention. But where that medical intervention is required, this is absolutely not about replacing that. And that quality assurance piece is vital to any work that is taken forward as a result of this project, because we absolutely can't have anything that could be doing more harm within communities. And so that quality assurance piece is a vital aspect in terms of building the capacity within communities. We also see a real opportunity with this to actually co-design with some of the communities what some of the bespoke area-based interventions might be, and again, might be useful to give some thought in terms of how the project may structure that community engagement, work with and through the community infrastructure to design very bespoke interventions within the parameters of the project, of course, but that will meet the very specific needs in that area. So again, that's something that might be well worth thinking about. As I've mentioned before, Urban Villages is a good relations initiative. Mark highlighted the vision at the start. We have adopted the TBUC vision of good relations, brought it down a level for each of the 5 urban village areas. So the communities we want to create are communities where good relations are present, and those exist when a community is strengthened by its diversity, where cultural expression is celebrated and embraced, and where everyone can live, learn, work and socialise together, free from prejudice, hate and intolerance. We do that, as I've said, through 3 strands on the Urban Villages programme, a number of community-led projects, the capital investments through the physical works and communities, and then cross-cutting support where there's projects brought in to address issues that have emerged across a number of the urban villages. In terms of the community-led projects, again, it would be useful to acquaint yourself with projects that are happening in the urban village areas, so that you're aware of the practice that's already existing. There's some excellent projects happening across all of the urban villages at the minute, and again, very useful to be aware of those, and not only aware, but to have an understanding of those, what they're aiming to achieve, and how a project of this nature could complement, add to, and build on what's already there. In terms of the good relations theory of change around all of this, I'd mentioned earlier that mental health issues and emotional resilience have emerged a lot as a cross-cutting theme. It's recurring across all of the areas, not just in terms of the impact it's having on the children and young people themselves, but in terms of the impact that's having on their mobility, for example, their ability to connect with other communities, their confidence in their own identity, which then impacts on their confidence and strength to engage with those from a different identity, but also in a much more sinister way around a different programme I'm involved with around tackling paramilitarism, that those often in communities who have issues with mental health, their own self-esteem, issues like that are easy prey for those very negative influences within communities. And so that can often be used as a way in which those groups can engage with young people and influence them in a very negative way. Also, it can be the outworking of young people who have possibly got involved without meaning to, and it's been a spiral, and that has had an impact. So there are clear links here with good relations and reconciliation, clear links with the ability of communities to move forward, to create this vision of the societies that we want to have, and for children and young people to play their full role within that. And so it would be really helpful to set out that kind of theory of change within your project from that good relations, wider cohesion and reconciliation point of view. Also, just to say, as well as the good relations, healthy lifestyles and well-being and community cohesion and understanding emerged as key themes, again, within those strategic frameworks across all 5 of the urban village area. And I'd mentioned earlier about the importance of building capacity through the Urban Villages programme, and so the focus on building the capacity of children and young people themselves within community to both address their own issues, but also act as peer mentors, for example, or ways in which they can equip themselves to better support their peers and their friends within their community. So that's an important focus. Alongside this, the importance of health and well-being to build the resilience of communities that continue to suffer the impacts of the past and those transgenerational challenges that I've talked about in terms of multiple deprivation. Some of the communities still continue to have that shadow of paramilitarism, and again, this is where the subtle nuances will come out across the 5 urban villages areas. So hopefully that gives you a sense of where we're coming from Urban Villages' point of view, from the Department of Health's priorities. I'm going to hand over to Sean now, who's going to talk about the policy context in the South before I come back and go into a little bit more detail on the types of interventions that might be useful to think about. Thanks.
Good morning, everyone. As the guy just said, my name is Sean McGrory. My role is a Youth Mental Health Development Manager for CHO1, Community Health Organisation 1, that represents Donegal, Sligo, Leitrim and Cavan Monaghan. So I'm going to bring you through really the policy context for the Republic of Ireland. So the first document I'm going to take you through is really the Programme for Government. The underlying document. Under the Programme for Government, we've committed to contributing to peace-building initiatives across the globe and to work with the Northern Ireland Executive to agree and implement cross-border projects that can benefit from EU funding through the INTERREG or the peace programmes. The Programme for Government will and does support an ethos of healthy living and mental well-being, and is committed to access both the availability of early intervention, recovery, and the aftercare. The next document I'm going to bring you through is the Connecting for Life. In the Republic, that is the national strategy to reduce suicide in the Republic of Ireland. The document emphasised the importance of a structured and coordinated community response. The initiative is about really enhancing the protective factors, both within young people, within families, and within communities, to prevent suicide. The strategy focuses on building community relations, building community capacity, and empowering communities to respond to people who are in crisis and who are in need. The next document is the Healthy Ireland. The Healthy Ireland, which runs from 2013 to 2025, the strategy recognises that health and well-being is affected by all aspects of life, from a person's economic status, their education, their housing, their physical environment in which people live and work. So it's cross-cutting across all aspects of a person's life. It promotes a healthy Ireland where everyone can enjoy physical and mental health well-being and reach their full potential, where well-being is valued and supported at every level of society, and everyone has a responsibility around well-being. Just like each and every one of us in this room all have physical health, we all have mental health. And depending on what's happening in our lives or where we are at a certain day, we can move over and backwards. It's a fluid thing, depending on our circumstances. There's 4 main goals to Healthy Ireland, and I should have said at the outset, my last slide, which you will get, has the web links to each and every one of these documents. So there's 4 main goals of Healthy Ireland. Goal 1 is to increase the proportion of people who are healthy at all stages of life. The second goal is to reduce health inequalities across society. Goal number 3 is to protect the public from threats to health and well-being. And the fourth goal is to create an environment where every individual and every aspect of sector of society, not just health across the board, has a role to play. The new document, which is called Better Outcomes, Brighter Futures, it's the first national overarching policy and framework for children and young people in the Republic of Ireland, aged from 0 to 24 years. It's developed and led by the Minister for Children and Youth Affairs on behalf of the government. The purpose of the framework really is about a coordinated policy approach across government, across all departments, not just across departments within the government, but across the community and voluntary sector as a whole, the entire community. The purpose of the framework is to coordinate policy to have better outcomes for children and young people. It's about cross-government and interagency collaboration, and highlights prevention and early intervention. And I think that's critical to everything we'll talk about today is, in the past we were looking at potentially looking at the acute sector. Where many of these documents we're talking about today is really moving upstream. How do we get into the realm of early intervention and prevention? Moving on to some of the key mental health. The Vision for Change is a document that was brought out in 2006. It's currently going through a refresh. That refresh hasn't been published yet. The strategy really sets out the direction for mental health services in Ireland. It describes a framework for building and fostering positive mental health across the entire community and providing accessible, community-based and specialist service based in the community. It really was a document and a policy about moving mental health services out of the acute setting into the community and into providing multidisciplinary teams that people can access care in the community as opposed to the acute setting. So it's really about multidisciplinary teams providing that care around a person in their community setting. We know from the refresh document in 2019, it's pushing that focus and it's really looking on primary prevention, which is what we're talking about today, primary prevention and early intervention, and positive mental health. And it really is having regard, I'll bring you through the document in a minute, the new National Task Force for Youth Mental Health, which is really pushing the envelope out. And we're really looking and pushing upstream now into, what is the fabric of a community? And how can we harness and build the capacity of the community to be able to look after the mental health of young people? The next document I'm going to take you through is the Sláinte Care. Sláinte Care is only new. It's the future of healthcare. It includes a need, really looking for political consensus and a 10-year plan for health across all political parties. So what we're really looking to establish is a universal single-tiered system where patients are treated based on their needs and not their willingness or ability to pay. And also it's really about reorientating services across not just mental health but all health services and moving from the acute setting into the community setting. So each and every document is looking looking at that transition out into the community. Well, what is the community where people live and how can we increase the capacity of people who live in the community? The mental health reform is Ireland's leading national coalition of mental health. There's more than 70 organisations as part of the mental health reform, and they work together to drive positive change from within mental health services. They talk about the new projects, the integrated employment for mental health supports for people between employment and mental health, and how can we bridge that between the mental health services and to get people out into meaningful employment. The government also has another strategy, which is a comprehensive employment strategy for people with disabilities. And there's also the dual diagnosis of people who have issues around disabilities also, in many instances of issues around mental health difficulties also. So this sets out a 10-year approach of ensuring that people with any form of disability who could and want to work are supported and able to do so. Having a job brings economic independence, social inclusion and personal fulfilment. This is why a government strategy for employment with people with disabilities is important. And this strategy again acknowledges the importance of building skills, building capacity from within the communities where people reside, and gives people the independence. A major document, which I think has relevance today, it's the new National Task Force for Youth Mental Health. This is really important for us within the health services, within mental health services, to give direction to how services look in the future and how they behave for the service user. So the vision behind this document really is, I suppose everybody on the panel referenced that today, it's a vision where a young person is both a unique individual, but also a young person is embedded within his or her family, within their school, within their college, within their community, within wider society. So they're not just a young person who may have issues. It's a societal issue. And the young people are embedded. And it looks at youth mental health as multifaceted. And it calls for a broader perspective than just a health perspective. This is like the village. It requires a village to look after a young person, to bring up a young person, an entire village, not just the health service from within a village. One of the key aspects which is critical to how we develop services in the future is the importance of the involvement of young people and their family and the communities in how we design and how we deliver mental health services going forward into the future. A core aspect is about building the capacity of the young person. So it's really important that the young person, we raise the literacy level of young people, their understanding of trauma and the past and how that impacts upon their life. So by building their capacity and their capacity to understand that they may have issues and to reach out for that. So help seeking is critically important. And also that we promote the capacity of the community. Everyone lives within a community. And as part of what we're trying to do within mental health and within the strategies going forward is about how do we increase the capacity and awareness from within the community to offer supports to young people who may be having difficulties in their lives. Promoting the mental health of children and young people from the more at-risk groups, those young people who may be growing up in particular areas, who have particular disadvantage. So more indicated programs targeted at specific groups of young people, and also more universal programs across the entire population. And finally, it's about building the capacity of those people who work with young people, youth workers, teachers, parents, the young people themselves, sports coaches, to build the resilience of the community to be able to support young people in times of need. So I suppose some of the key objectives for us looking about this project really is it's about to improve good relations in communities that have been impacted negatively by the conflict through the development and delivery of youth and children's programs focused on mental health and well-being and increasing resilience. To improve the mental outcomes through early intervention, prevention and recovery, really about ensuring that we have alignment to these policies. When we're moving forward within the projects, the projects that are developed are in line with the policies and the future direction of where we're going with the policy in the Republic. To develop joint solution-focused approaches to resolve and identify barriers and challenges to cross-border service delivery, which exacerbates the social and economic isolation of young people and heightens the risk of mental health problems. To build resilience amongst children and young people in the areas most affected by division, community tension and the legacy of the conflict. To develop the capacity of the community infrastructure. And this isn't, as people have referenced, this is not about displacing what's currently there. This is about looking at a strengths-based approach. Well, what are the strengths? How can we build upon the strengths within the infrastructure that already exists? And it's to build a sustainable model of support and mentoring within communities that will leave a lasting legacy. I suppose finally, the programme is underpinned by the contention that issues relating to children and young people's trauma and poor mental health lie at the heart of many community relations and reconciliation challenges that often manifest themselves in either intra or inter-community relations. And there is a list of the documents that I've just referenced. So I'm going to pass it back to Lindsay again. Thank you.
You'll be glad to hear these are the last couple of slides before there's time for some questions then. Okay, so Sean outlined the objectives as we see it for the call, making that important point is about good relations and mental health and promoting emotional resilience is merely the mechanism for achieving that. So just a little bit then around what programme content might look like, and a caveat with all of this with these are some ideas on the types of things as we were working through really the methodology of this call and its substance. These are some of the types of things that seem to us as what would deliver what we need to see in communities. But the fundamental principle that runs through everything is that of quality assurance that I mentioned earlier. And so any content that's included really needs to embed the principles of trauma-informed practice. suggested through a 3-strand approach, and this is really reflecting the framework prescribed by the National Institute of Clinical Excellence, the NICE model, and it's often referred to as their stepped model of care. And this is to ensure safety and protection and quality assurance for anyone that will avail of these services or be a beneficiary or be involved in this project in any way. And so it's important that it's anything that comes forward is within that context and has that important quality assurance piece. In our thinking, we were planning on the basis of an age range right from 3 to 24, and again this is reflected in the 3 strands, so some prevention, early intervention and recovery. And again, I refer you to the earlier slide from the Department of Health in Northern Ireland that set out that approach, that those 3 strands are important in terms of addressing mental health and emotional resilience. So if we take each strand in turn then, so around prevention, again, these are some of the types of things that you might want to think about in designing your call and in your conversations with potential delivery partners. So we had thought of a train the trainers model, consistent with the idea of building capacity within communities. Again, very important, this is quality assured, and the aim of that to build capacity within communities to both promote good mental health and well-being and to identify mental health and well-being issues, along with ideas around coping strategies, resilience building strategies and appropriate signposting knowledge. And again, back to the point I was making earlier around the Urban Villages programme and the feedback we've been getting from communities is that it is youth leaders, it's community leaders, it's early year teachers and leaders, it's sports club coaches that are interacting with our children and young people every day and have a level of trust, have a relationship with those children and young people, and they're saying we don't feel equipped to deal with these issues, but they're a real resource within our communities. There is maybe a greater likelihood of children and young people going to them as opposed to other people or to clinicians. And so this is the focus on our thinking behind this type of intervention. We'd also thought around types of interventions around peer mentoring programs, again back to the idea of building capacity amongst young people themselves to become positive peer influences within their community, within their peer group, again recognising the influence that they can have in a positive way over their friends, within their friendship groups, within their youth club or wherever it is that they're interacting with their peers. A model of assertive outreach to engage with specifically hard to reach young people who are at risk of developing mental health difficulties. So that may be those young people within communities that you feel are on the fringes of a paramilitary organisation, for example, or extremely isolated within their communities. And again, this may differ from area to area and from community to community. And to develop locally driven good mental health and wellbeing resilience promotion and communication awareness tools, possibly using visual media or social communications to promote key messages. Again, trying to be relevant to young people, but also this is an important legacy as well, because these are the types of resources and skills that can be built within a community to wrap around young people, to set that very positive narrative for them and to provide that important scaffolding within each of the urban villages as well. So that takes us on to the early intervention strand, and again, this is not an exhaustive list. These are just some of the types of things that had certainly guided our thinking when we were approaching this. So around the whole notion of early intervention, trying to use other ways of engaging with young people around the issues of mental health and emotional resilience, whether that be through sports, arts, music, drama, to promote their own self-help and self-cares using the 5 steps to well-being and to provide signposting. So again, trying to break down some of the stigmas that exist within communities where a child or young person may not engage in a programme that's titled mental health and emotional well-being, but they may well engage in a sports programme that can start and introduce some of these issues through that. So that was the thinking behind that type of intervention. Then specific training around appropriate suicide accredited intervention skills, and again that would be adapted to the various groups within communities that could benefit from that, and some of those have been listed. Similarly as well, and to similar range of audiences, training in appropriate first aid for mental health accredited intervention skills. So again, consistent with building capacity within communities around these issues. Then the development of a shared integrated mental health and wellbeing resilience guidelines for youth-focused organisations. Again, a real opportunity here to build in that whole shared approach, that sustained contact. Even the process of developing that could be a really valuable mechanism for building good relations across communities. And then working with young people themselves to both identify and reduce barriers to seeking help for mental health and well-being in their local community, to try and understand better the barriers that they would face or that they would feel in seeking help or asking for advice, so that those can be better tackled. And then the third strand, and this is where there's some possibly innovative and new practice and new ideas out there to develop and implement children and young people's emotional resilience colleges. There's been some work done around this. We would see this type of approach as being a real example of a sustainable, lasting legacy of a call like this. But it would be useful for you to look into that model, into the work that's been done both here and elsewhere. I would say this doesn't have to be a physical place. This can be a virtual emotional resilience college. It could be structured in different ways, but it's really a safe space for young people to both share and connect, and for good practice and learning, training materials to be shared and to be available. So again, real scope for different ideas to come forward around that, but again within that quality assurance framework that we've laid out. And then the second thing that we'd thought of around the type of thing that might fall under the recovery strand, to explore and implement best practice approaches to peer mentoring to support young people who are currently receiving mental health services, encouraging their involvement and participation in the reform of services and the development and design through the emotional resilience colleges. So there may be a way of engaging those young people in the design of what that would look like within their community, again consistent with that co-design approach that we talked through earlier. So again, I said those are just some of the types of things that we had thought across those three strands, in anticipation that if you bring those three strands together in an area-based focused way, as is being suggested in terms of the targeting of the urban villages and the areas in the border region, that you could have a real impact in terms of building good relations and reconciliation through the very important mechanism of promoting positive mental health and emotional resilience. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lindsay. I appreciate you've been sitting for some time now. We've brought lunch forward to 12:30, so we have a short time to reflect and then a bit of time to potentially network. If we could bring up the Slido poll, so just to give you a feel, what we're seeing is 73% of organisations or partners wish to be project partners. We've seen 18% interest in being lead partner, and then 6% not relevant to the organisation. Maybe I'll just go over some of the key questions before we get into some of the issues about what will be valuable to you. So if we could look at the questions on Slido, and we'll take them in turn. Okay. Can we go to the questions, Thomas? Just a couple of core documents that you should read before you consider being lead partner. One of them is the programme rules. Sets out in section 7 so clearly some of the key requirements around financing and so forth. So it's definitely worth having a look at that. One of the questions I was seeing pop up, I think there was 2 questions relating to, is it one project or many projects? It's one project with a total value of 6.4. So let me be clear on that. It's one project that we are looking to fund which covers the entire eligible region, with the focus being on the urban villages for a total value of 6.4. So in reality, you'll probably have a lead partner and a lot of delivery agents or people coming to the party with expertise. The first point there is around list of attendees. I would need to check with our GDPR expert, but I see no issue providing everyone is happy for me to release names and organisations that are here today. I'll check in with my data controller, and providing that's okay, then I'll release that post this event. Presentations will be available after today's event. That's not a problem. Is this locked down or is it continually moving? I'm just looking at the issues as they're being presented here. So the next one is around mental health, presenting multiple barriers to engagement with services and can reduce meaningful and sustained engagement. No, they're not. The answer to that one's very clear. No, we're about building capacity. We're not about the engagement with young people in statutory health services or the non-engagement. You need to think about this clearly. We're not measuring success in terms of the number of referrals to mental health services or the number of participants on a programme. What we're seeing as success is the capacity within communities being developed. And it's up to you to present the rationale as to how you're going to do that. I gave an example around training. So you might bring 2 organisations that engage with young people together and train them collectively. Yes, we need to understand the community background of the people being trained in order to understand that that's going to help towards peace and reconciliation. But that will not have an impact on your financial penalties. You know, you're setting out on a trajectory of what you hope to achieve. Providing you procure everything correctly, incur expenditure correctly, there's not likely to be any financial penalties around that because it's not a specific output. Let me be clear on that. If there's any existing building positive relations projects, they'll tell you, you know, what they hope to achieve is to create, you know, they're winning hearts and minds here, and you can't quantify that, and that's to some extent what you're doing, and you're trying to where you can get measurable outcomes to that. So no, we don't have a sort of Tinder for making relationships with the other projects. I'm sure there's a market there somewhere. But what we can do, because we do have finances, so if anyone knows of anything, please make a suggestion to me or the team as to how we make that possible. I'm aware of things like Basecamp and all of these sorts of tools out there that might help bring relationships together, but I don't know how we do that in a project sense. So we'd certainly happy to facilitate that if you know what the solution is. Yes, we're seeking one project. Is the funding for admin and finance staff as part of the call? Of course it is. You know, providing you could demonstrate it's leading towards the deliverables and the outputs, the financing is justified. I think there's precedent out there in other fields. I'm thinking particularly Peace for Youth programme, where you have to show a direct link between the funded staff and the activity. That's not. You still have to show a link in this case, but it's not as clear cut as the others, because the other one attracted a 40% overhead. So please don't be confused by that. We're only looking to fund one call, one project. The recommended start date, I would realistically, if we're making decisions in October, I would say that you should be looking to start the project in January of the following year. You need to give yourself time to get things in place. You could certainly start activity, and you may wish to start activity in sort of November, December, and that's still eligible for the programme, but realistically, putting adverts out, everything else, it takes time. Organisations have their own policies and procedures around that. Staff costs. Alistair, do you want to talk to staff costs?
Yeah. Apologies if it wasn't clear the first time. Staff costs. The slide on staff costs listed a whole host of requirements that we'd be looking for. Now, that's provided in an Excel template, which is attached on EMS for you to populate, okay? And if you need any advice and guidance on the population of that, get in contact and we'll help you with that, okay? Does that answer the question? That's what I said. It's a mandatory attachment. It's an Excel template, okay? So all the questions or all the requirements that were listed, they're actually fields in the template that you've got to complete. Okay. Yeah.
There's no weighting given to the activity. It's what we expect. It's targeted activity. If you don't include it, it would be remiss of you and unlikely that your application would be successful. But we don't give a weighting towards that. The next one down around the traumatised communities require a mental resilience programme. Potentially they do. We're not the experts in this. It's up to you as a project cohort to present the solution. We are open to how you want to do that and how you want to deliver that. What I would say in that sense, though, is you need to check that no one else is doing it. There's no sense in duplicating something that may need to be done. Is there anyone want to ask questions the old school way? Yes. Siobhan, do we have a mic? Okay, go for it.
Which are attitudinal survey indicators of an adult, associated with an adult survey, yet we're dealing here with 3 to 24 years. So what I'm going to ask is, to what extent will the pathway between the activities that are undertaken as part of this and these indicators, so we have to tie them together in a very defining way. So we need to create change in people's responses to a survey. And what ways will that element of the project begin, compared with all the other aspects, all the wonderful things that are doing to change what we see the things that you want to measure. And that for me is this
You're entirely correct. Essentially, we are retrofitting an existing indicator into our programme. It's not a clean fit, hence we are doing an independent evaluation. And we will be informed by the project presenting what they think is the best data set for us to evaluate in that regard. In terms of how we assess it against that, it's notional. It's about making a difference. We're not going to ask you to say, well, how many people of that 5% difference are you going to make a contribution to? We're not that inclined in terms of the detail. So from our perspective, we understand that the result indicator is out there, the Life and Times. We have to use that for the purposes of the programme, and we don't expect it to be something that drives your programme entirely, your programme of activity. That's why we're offering up an independent evaluation and why we're asking that you just pay notion to it, but don't be led by it.
Okay, and then another related question is about the independent evaluation. Some of the things that we will be looking to shift here relate to issues around empathy, resilience, how to measure things. Can we set out within our application types of models of change that we would propose for that evaluation too, so that we can define what each of our activities are going to achieve and how they then relate to your outputs in terms of peace and mental well-being?
100%. This collectively is a group of experts presenting what they feel is the best way forward. We will obviously challenge that where we see fit, so that it is robust. But if you present a comprehensive set of evaluation techniques and tools, we're not ones to argue with that. We're the ones that will commission the work independently so that we ensure that we get that. Because 100%. Yes, 100%. Yeah. Come on, yeah.
It's just in relation to your age group from 3 to 24 again. A lot of the trauma informed, business informed work that's achieving those benefits actually happens under the age of 3 in the context of families. And to what extent are you consider going a wee bit lower, looking at families and how they engage with cars? Or the target groups clearly are going to be about 3 and anything under that.
It's about being evidence-led, and certainly from our perspective, we're not hard and fast. It's a target. It's not hard and fast. If you see that there's an argument to go slightly out with that, we would certainly be open to listening to that. Having said that, we would expect the majority to be within the range. Okay. Any more questions from the audience? Any points anybody wants to make? We have some more questions, I understand. This call is building capacity rather than delivering mental health service. That's correct. It's about building capacity within communities to deal with the issues around mental health, hence the title. Can you confirm that there is no requirement for the applicant to provide match? There is no requirement to provide match funding. You could come to us asking for 100% funding, 85% of which will be brought through ERDF and the remaining 15% through the match funding of the departments. I've covered the start date. I think have we covered all the questions now on Slido? Yes, okay. Maybe we could go back to the poll again, because I suppose what we want to know is, what do you now need? I get there's a matchmaking service requirement. Hopefully you'll have an opportunity over lunch to network and make relations over lunch, and Mark will be able to direct you, because I understand there's a slight change in rooms, or the rooms it could be split. The turnaround time, it's really interesting. So May, in terms of getting something together, you feel is unrealistic. Does anybody want to counter that and say what they think is realistic? I'm not suggesting that we can move the deadline, but there's no sense in us having a deadline if no one's going to apply.
So what you're going to get is existing partnerships, not something
yeah. Yes. No. I think I fully appreciate that there is a risk, but we would hope that some of the existing partnerships could link together, and that we have a regional impact to this. Yes, the next point is entirely right, ensuring that you have included, and then it has to be the case that you have the right opportunity to mix partners. I suppose we've got 3 other workshops, and this is what I feel reassured about. We have time between now and then to maybe do a bit more matchmaking and seek a bit more feedback from the audience and potential project applicants, whereby we could help tease out some of the issues that you're dealing with. I suppose today we've lodged in the psyche what we're looking for, an idea of the process in terms of both the assessment and the online application process, and we will be available over the coming weeks to help with that. The application support workshop, connecting organisations, sharing details. Okay. Is there anything else anybody wants to add at this point in time? I suppose I want to go away on a relatively positive note around what we're trying to do here. We're trying to build peace by addressing a shared problem of the resilience in our young people. And this is an opportunity for you as practitioners, both in peace building and mental health fields, to come together and really make a difference and hopefully create a legacy, because it is sizable, 6.4. It is challenging in terms of the time frame, 3 years, but we're here to work with you and for you in terms of the application process and all of that. So, look, I look forward to chatting with you over lunch. The SUPB staff are available to take any questions and will help to facilitate as much as possible. Mark? Sorry?
What we want to do is to discuss with the next group coming in. They will also be delivering a project under BPR, what their requirements are. So we just want to make sure we take their views on board as well. The last workshop will be no later, we're proposing, than 2 weeks before the closure. Just on the point of the timescales, please do keep in touch with us. And if there are enough people indicating that it's just too tight, and we think that we can't get meaningful, good projects delivered or an application in a time, we will review that. We do have some scope. What we want to do is make sure we've got really good applications in. So if that is becoming a barrier, and we hear it from enough of you, we will consider that, both Paul and myself, as to what we can do to potentially extend that or elongate that period somewhat.
Yep.
Can I just go into one final point? We're interested in collaboration, as Paul suggested, ideally, potentially one proposal. And while we don't have Tinder or Basecamp, as he also mentioned, we do have some space here today for people who may want to sit down and have a discussion of sorts, potentially with other individuals. Is there anybody here today who thinks that would be useful? Can you stick your hand up, please? Right, okay. Can I suggest then that for those of you who would like the discussion, that we just stay in this room for now and we arrange the chairs around, because this is probably the best space that we have. And for those of you who think that you've had enough for now and you want to go away and contemplate things or speak to other people before you would re-engage again, we can ask you to move outside in preparation for lunch. What we will do after today, sorry Paul, there's one point I missed because I was out with Leanne. Can we share the names, the contact details of everybody that's here today?
Hopefully I can. I just need to check with our data controller because I know that we'll have email, name, organisation. So I don't know the logistics of it, but I'm sure it's not an issue.
Well, is there anybody who objects to having their names shared with other individuals that are here today initially?
No.
Okay.
No
that's
objections.
The first point. Okay. So I think we can do something around that. So for those of you who wish to collaborate or have a discussion of sorts, let's arrange it in here. And for those of you who want to move out for lunch now and ponder or think or just speak to your colleague, then can I ask that we move outside, straight across the corridor, through the double doors, and lunch will be ready in the next 10 minutes.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks for your time today.